A landmark law has now been implemented in Queensland, Australia, known as Daniel's Law. Now, this law will allow us, regular people, everyday human beings, parents, friends, regular human beings, to find out where creeps live. A list, a geographical location for these horrible people. And I think that is a fantastic thing to happen. But the reason it's happened is because of something so horrific. This is the story of a 13-year-old boy who vanished, was never seen again, and it is honestly just horrific. This is the story of the disappearance that changed Australia forever. On the 7th of December 2003, a young boy left his house, never to be seen again. His name was Daniel Morcombe. He was born to Bruce and Denise Morcombe on the 19th of December 1989. He had a twin brother and an older brother and grew up in the Sunshine Coast area of Australia. Now, I've been to the Sunshine Coast quite a bit doing shows, and it is a beautiful part of the world and an awesome place, I imagine, to grow up in. Daniel was a very quiet kid. He loved sports, hanging out with his friends, playing video games, all of those things that kids did in the 90s, and usually without fear. Now, I was born in 1993, a few years after Daniel, and I can only imagine his youth, the things he did. Grew up with Pokemon cards, Nintendo, PlayStation 1, all of those sort of games. That was his upbringing, very similar to mine. One of those upbringings where it's relatively safe outside, you come home when the lights turn on, that kind of thing. But Daniel was the outlier. He was the kid who people told the stories about, the kid that was taken. And we all heard those stories as kids, and we all probably just looked at it and went, yeah, that's never going to happen to me. And maybe he did the exact same thing. Because when he was taken, it was such a non-event. And what I mean by that is he was just doing his normal thing. He wasn't doing anything outlandish. He wasn't running away from home or anything like that. In fact, horrifically enough, he went out to buy Christmas presents. And that was why he was out of the house. On the day of his disappearance, the 7th of December 2003, he left his house and planned to catch a bus to the Sunshine Plaza in Maroochydore. He was going to get a haircut and he was going to buy Christmas presents. Now, at this time, he was wearing a red T-shirt, which has since become very, very iconic in this case. He was wearing shorts and sneakers as well. At around 1:35 in the afternoon, Daniel left home and he walked to a bus stop on Nambour Connection Road underneath the Keel Mountain Overpass, which sounds like it comes from a script from a movie. The bus he intended to catch broke down and it was replaced with another bus that probably because of the breakdown was full, and the bus driver decided not to stop, allegedly, because the bus was full and there was no room for any more passengers. That's how the story goes anyway. Witnesses in the case and on the bus, they saw Daniel waiting alone at the bus stop, a 13-year-old, which is not is a baby, but also isn't a baby at the end of the day. He's old enough to be able to go and catch a bus, I think, at that age, or at least back in the day he was anyway. But multiple people see Daniel at the bus stop and then see a man nearby. And that man's name is Brett Peter Cohen. Now, obviously, Brett Cohen, at this point, was just a random dude, nearby. But it would turn out that he was nothing short of a monster of the highest order. One of these people that Netflix could do an original series about. He's a fucking grub. He left home at 1:35. By 2 p.m., 25 minutes later, gone. Never to return. That was it. For all intents and purposes, he had vanished into thin air, and his entire family was without answers. Where did this boy go? Was he in the bush? Did he get lost? Has he caught the wrong bus and ended up on the wrong side of town? People didn't even have... Do we have mobile phones back then? I don't think so, right? I doubt this 13-year-old kid in 2003 had a mobile phone. So there's no way to contact him. He's just gone. There was a massive manhunt underway immediately. Obviously, his parents panicked, as any parent would. They freaked out. They were like, holy shit, where is he? What's going on? And I can only imagine. I know, like, for example, my son the other day, we were at the zoo and he ended up behind this big koala statue and you couldn't see him immediately. And even though I couldn't find him for like 10 seconds, I was like, shit, I was panicked, right? So I could not imagine the distress and the horror that has gone through these poor parents' minds and continues to this day. Just, mate. Horrific. Police, SES volunteers, helicopters, divers, sniffer dogs. There's posters and flyers everywhere. The media are talking about it nonstop. It's the biggest story of the year. And coming up to Christmas too, this is massive for everybody. Everybody's panicking, terrified. You know, what's happened to this kid? Where is he? There's a case right now where a young kid went missing in Western Australia. And the same sort of thing happens. Like, you just panic, you freak out. And everyone starts to look at their own kids and think, what would we do in that situation? You know, would our kid go missing? Would they know what to do? Or could they be taken? Are there creeps around in the area? I know from a friend of mine who's a police officer, or was a police officer, that the area that I live in, and apparently a lot of different places, there are a lot of like creeps that live around. And you don't know who these people are. That is the worst part. There needs to be... and this should happen all over the country, and I'm alluding to what happened in Queensland. There needs to be all over the country a register of people who have committed crimes against children, or SEX crimes as well, like everywhere. We need to know who these people are. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this is where, over the next period of 5 years, where there's a lot of investigations, a lot going on. The police are constantly working. When I was in New York, actually, I was speaking to the security guy, the head of the security that I was working with, and he was an ex-NYPD guy, and he was telling me about, this was right after Charlie Kirk got shot, and he was telling me about all these people saying, oh, well, you need to tap this phone, you need to do this, you need to, you know, search this person's house. And he's like, I understand that, and I understand why the public gets upset, but this takes time because you have to go through the appropriate channels. You have to get warrants, you have to get them approved by judges, et cetera, et cetera. And if you don't do that, then it can be admissible in court or inadmissible in court. The court can just throw it out and not take anything from that evidence. So you have to do it the right way. Otherwise, when you get to court and you get to the point where you might be able to use it to lock some horrible person up, it might just be thrown out. So the 5-year period after this was a massive police operation. There were some 10,000 tips that came in. Now, those tips probably, at least, let's say 40% of them have to be, you know, maybe a little bit legit or at least looked into. The police had 5 years to investigate the disappearance, but regrettably came up with, well, no body, no witnesses, and no confession, no charges, nothing. There was a number of people of interest, though, and one was Brett Cohen. He was a person of interest from basically the beginning, or at least people suspected him of being involved. He was interviewed, I think, twice in the early days of the investigation. Where were you? What were you doing? All this type of stuff. And the reason for that being, obviously he was seen in the area, but he also lived in the area, and he also had a history of sexual offences against boys. Now, that would be probably enough for me to go, let's fucking look at this. But there's also other things that spark suspicion in the police officer's minds. He claimed that he didn't see anything in the area. He claimed that, you know, there was not much going on at the time. He'd seen nothing suspicious, and he'd lied about certain things. And that just made everyone go, what's going on here? This is a little bit strange. This prick knows something. But no evidence, no confession, just a hunch and a history that this guy was a creep. And that's when this story, which is tragic, turns into something really quite And I know this is probably the wrong way to look at it, but quite awesome. And police officers cop a lot of shit. On this channel, we always respect the police that show us respect. I think that coppers do one of the hardest jobs in the entire world. They have to deal with horrific tragedy and death and destruction, and then immediately go to pulling you over because you got your phone out the window filming Snapchat filters, you big old weirdo, you're 35, why are you on Snapchat? Like, it's a very tough job. But this is a really cool thing that the investigators did. What they did was they developed what is known as a Mr. Big operation, a covert operation, a method that was first developed in Canada to solve cold cases, to get confessions out of people. The goal was to create a fake criminal network and then bring Brett Cohen in to the criminal network, become a friend of his, become an associate, develop a brotherhood, if you will, where he wanted to be involved with the daily undertakings of what is essentially a gang. But what do you need to do to become a part of a gang? What is the story as old as time? You have to prove yourself, right? An initiation. So they set a trap. Over the next several months, undercover officers approached Cohen and gradually integrated him into their inner circle. They presented themselves as professional criminals capable of making problems disappear for a price. They didn't fuck around either. They created jobs for him to do, small jobs. You know, you got to deliver this parcel that may contain something, or you got to deliver a message, or you've got to count some cash, run some errands, whatever it happens to be. As long as it's a little bit dodgy, then, you know, you can trust other criminals, right? You can trust them with your criminal past. That's the whole idea. And it also helped that Cohen was, at this time, and who knows for how long before, he was unemployed. He was living in caravan parks. This bloke was a bum, right? He was basically just drifting through life waiting to die. And this gave him some income, you know, some cash to spend on whatever. You know, he was able to actually live a little bit because he was doing these minor, sort of semi-illegal jobs for this alleged criminal network that he was working with. And this gives him a bit of credit too. When he catches up with his friends at the pub or whatever, he's going, I'm working with these guys. They're a pretty big deal. Look at me. He thinks he's a mad dog. He thinks he's going to be a part of the group, a part of the crew. And this really gives someone like him some confidence, some belief in himself, some ownership, something to belong to. And then when the trap is ready, you know, the bait is there. He's looking at it. He's rubbing his hands together. When you make him need to divulge information that is one of his darkest secrets, he is willing to do that because he trusts you, because he needs to belong. Over roughly 3 months, Cohen was flown around the country. He went to Perth, he went to Broome, all with the undercover team. They portrayed themselves as a tight-knit criminal brotherhood where honesty was the key to advancement, to climb the ladder. Because if everyone knew everyone's secrets, then you can't rat on each other, right? You can't go and tell the police something because you'll just tell them something. It's almost like mutually assured destruction. We don't launch a nuclear campaign against you because you'll just do the same to us. He was then made to believe that he was on the cusp of joining their inner circle. But he needed to go over one last hurdle. He needed to divulge all information, have a completely clean slate, no compromisable information about him that the group didn't know that could harm the group's reputation or come between them and their business making money. And that's when the Mr. Big figure, the undercover copper, the leader of this organization, eventually told Cohen, after months and months and months of gaining his trust, that if there was any serious criminal offences in his past, he needed to tell him because then they could go back and clean it up, basically, you know, make sure that it was never traceable to Cohen or the group. This is such a key moment in the case because they all suspected him. They spent so much time trying to gain his trust, all this time, money. You know, the parents had, I'm sure maybe they knew what was going on, maybe they didn't, but this is such an incredible story. The trap was set, the bait was laid, and Cohen was there for the taking. And in a staged meeting in a Perth hotel room in August 2011, Cohen confessed. He told the undercover police that he abducted Daniel from the bus stop, took him to an isolated location, tried to sexually assault him, where Daniel then defended himself and escaped, screamed, and so Cohen grabbed him by the throat and strangled him until he was dead. He then dumped the body in nearby bushland in the Glasshouse Mountains, which is a massive area. We filmed stuff out there. It's such a giant area, and returned later to take it deeper into the scrub before he then disposed of Daniel's belongings, his clothes and shoes and whatnot. He even drew a map as to where to find Daniel's remains. It's a complete confession. And because they had a warrant to do all this, it's all admissible in court. They had it all on video. They had it all on audio. They had the map, the confession, everything. Then the police searched the bushland near the Glasshouse Mountains, about 25 kilometres from where Daniel actually disappeared. So he hadn't gone far. In all that time, in so many years, he'd only gone 25 kilometres and he was there the whole time. That's such a sad part of this story. They went through dense vegetation. They went through, and it's very, very dense in there. It's crazy bushland. There's, obviously a million trees. There's lantana. There's leaf litter. But they did find, in a few days, Daniel's skeletal remains, a pair of shoes, fragments of clothing consistent with what Daniel was wearing at the time of his disappearance, and later forensic testing confirmed that it was Daniel Morcombe that they found. Once this was all confirmed, Cohen was arrested on the 13th of August 2011 in Queensland. He was charged with murder, child stealing, indecent treatment of a child under 16 and interfering with a corpse. At Cohen's trial, obviously, the confession was a centerpiece of evidence. Now, I would imagine that if I was a defense lawyer, I'd probably say he was trying to just impress these people. He didn't actually do it, etc., etc. But the Supreme Court trial and conviction that took place between February and March 2014 found him guilty on all counts, and he was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum non-parole period of 20 years, which is fucking insane anyway. That should just be locked up forever. And as horrific as this story is, it leaves us with something relatively positive. There is new legislation in Queensland. And hopefully, well, I really do hope that this takes... it grows all over the country. We need this everywhere. The new legislation in Queensland is a 3-tier public register that will be created for convicted child S offenders who breach their reporting obligation or whereabouts are unknown. Okay, I've got an issue with that. It should just be, if you are convicted of that crime, you should have your name on a register, and you should have a fucking... some sort of tracking device on you. The public will have access to the names and photographs, tier 1, of high-risk offenders. Good. Whose locations are unknown via an online platform. Good. Parents and guardians can apply to view whether someone living in the area is listed on the register. Good. Individuals can check if a person will have unsupervised access to a child. Now, this is such an important thing, particularly with what's been happening in the childcare system in Australia. Like, these pedos are going out of their way to become involved in these jobs, to the point where I would not put my kid in a childcare service where there is a male. Sorry. Importantly, misusing the register's information, such as inciting harassment or vigilante activity, is criminalised. Oh, interesting. So, Daniel's parents, Bruce and Denise, they founded the Daniel Morcombe Foundation in 2005 to raise awareness for public safety. And they go around, they talk to kids at schools and stuff like that. But this law is all because of them. So I can't imagine what you guys have been through, but you've done an amazing thing for a lot of other kids. I hope that gives you some solace in the fact that you've saved children from what you do. There are no words. So... I mean, well done for that. But yeah, I'm so sorry for what you went through. My only criticism of the law is it doesn't go far enough. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below, ladies and gentlemen. Do we need harsher prison sentences? Do we need harsher punishments? What do we need to protect kids? I don't know. But ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back tomorrow with another video, a more lighthearted one. But I hope you enjoy these videos. They're different. There's a lot more research that obviously goes into them, and a lot more time to make them and make them the way they are. But I think they are worth doing. So let me know in the comment section if you enjoy them. Until next time, I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.